The Woodpecker and the Crane, from the book Being Dakota, by Amos E. Oneroad and Alanson B. Skinner. The woodpecker was in his winter quarters, a large hollow tree, when late in the autumn a visitor came to talk with him about staying there for the winter. The woodpecker, being a non-migratory bird, a bird that does not fly south for the winter, knew from experience how bad northern winters could be. And like a good, wise elder brother, he said, "You had better fly south where it is warm. The winters here are cold, and I do not have enough food for both of us." The visitor, who was Crane, answered, "Oh, yes, brother, but I want to stay up here for the winter. I have enough food stored up for the cold weather." The woodpecker again spoke, saying, "My younger brother, hear me, and listen well to what I say. We have hard winters, and your legs are too long. You will freeze." But the crane answered, "Brother, I am going to stay up here and live with you in this hollow tree for the winter. I have enough food to last till spring." The woodpecker saw it was no use to argue with Crane, so he said, "All right then, you may stay with me for the winter. Bring your supplies up here." So the crane was happy to think that he was staying north for once. He went home and brought back his supplies. Most of it was sinchincha, or young wild rice, a bulb or root which grows along the rivers and lakes. He piled it up in a corner of Woodpecker's home, and then he went back and brought some more. Soon after this, the cold weather came, and snow began to fall. That day, the woodpecker and the crane stayed inside, and they built a fire. The crane did not seem to mind his first cold day. The next day was fine, and the crane went outside and made tracks in the snow. He thought that the woodpecker must have been telling him something that wasn't true. Day after day he would go out and walk on the snowbank, and although every now and then there came a storm, he thought that it was an easy winter. It did not seem so cold as he expected. The two birds were very happy, and along toward midwinter the days were warm and the snow began to melt, and the crane waded in the pools of water that formed here and there. He thought surely the spring had come, so he ran into the house and told his brother that the spring had come, and he had even waded in the water. He took out his winter supplies and dumped them in a pile. "Brother, what are you doing?" asked Woodpecker. "Why, spring is here now, you know. I have been down to the lake and waded in the water." "No, my younger brother, this is not spring. Don't throw away your food. Bring it in again. We will have more winter yet, with lots of storms." But the crane knew too much about the weather, so the woodpecker said again, "Brother, when we have some more wintry days, you will wish that you hadn't stayed up here. You will long for your sinchincha." But the crane only laughed and went out to wade in the water until he came in for the night, to sleep and dream of the fine weather that was coming in the morning. But next day he awoke to find that a storm had come during the night, and Woodpecker had been up for some time and had a fire blazing. The crane looked out, and he couldn't see anything. The storm kept up all day, and the crane had nothing to eat. The next morning the wind was still blowing, and Crane was very hungry. He ran out to where he had thrown his roots, and he was able, by aid of his long, slender bill, to dig them out, one by one, but they were now frozen as hard as pebbles. His legs began to get numb, and he had a hard time getting back. He found the woodpecker sitting by the fire, cracking a nut. "I told you what was coming," said the woodpecker, "but you didn't believe me. Better stay inside. We will have more stormy days before winter is gone." Crane made no reply. He sat before the fire thinking of the warm south where his relatives must have been for some time, and he hung his head. Day after day he sat there poking the fire with his long bill until the fire turned his bill black and burnt the top of his head red. He used his wing to brush up the ashes, and the sparks burnt the feathers black, and his beautiful white plumage was smoked to a dull gray color. All these changes came to him as a punishment for staying behind his people when they went south. And today, if you chance to see a sandhill crane, you will notice the black bill, red top, and dull gray color of the bird, with the wing feathers tipped with black. This is the history of his change, for once he had beautiful plumage like his elder brother, the whooping crane. All this time the woodpecker had not been idle, and as he rattled and cracked his nuts, he thought of his younger brother, the crane. "I'll invite my friends to come here for the purpose of asking those who are adventurous to go after and bring back the spring," he thought. That night the guests came in one by one until Woodpecker's lodge was crowded. In came the bear, panther, lynx, fisher, otter, mink, weasel, timber wolf, prairie wolf, coyote, fox, porcupine, raccoon, squirrel, golden eagle, kite, and last of all, the tadpole. It was indeed a great gathering, and the result of the council which they held was that the tadpole, fox, otter, and kite were selected to go after the spring weather. When the day arrived, the brave men set forth on their dangerous quest. It took many days before they arrived at the home of Spring Weather, which was inside a great enclosure. The doorkeepers were 2 mountain lions, and so the warriors paused and talked over who would be the first to attempt to go in. The lot fell to Tadpole, who was instructed to try to slip through the door unnoticed. He was then to go to the chief, who was called the Keeper of the Sunflower, and make himself known. The kite and the otter were to wait outside, and while the tadpole excited commotion, Fox was to sneak in also. Kite and Otter recognized some of their summer friends inside, but the doorkeepers were not pleased to see them at all. Otter presently began to feel very uncomfortable in his warm winter fur, but Kite did not seem to mind. Meanwhile, Tadpole passed in, and being so small that no one noticed him, he made his way straight to the Keeper of the Sunflower. When Tadpole got to the Keeper of the Sunflower, he began to mumble something, but as he had no mouth, he could not be understood. So a great crowd of excited spectators gathered around, and soon his deformity was noticed, and all began to exclaim, "He has no mouth!" And that drew still more people to the place. Even the doorkeepers became curious and left their posts, and this gave Fox his chance to slip in. Tadpole kept on mumbling away until someone cried, "Let us cut a mouth for him! He has some news that he is anxious to tell us." So they cut a mouth for him, but before he could speak, someone else cried, "Fox has stolen the sunflower!" And everybody rushed to the scene. Sure enough, the sunflower was gone, and all who were good runners began to make chase. Fox tied the sunflower to the end of his tail and ran slowly to deceive his pursuers. He was in the lead, and the crowd was headed by the 2 mountain lion doorkeepers. Fox played all the tricks he was capable of and caused great excitement because of his narrow escapes. As the spring traveled wherever the sunflower was taken, the birds were free to go, and they went as they pleased, in flocks or in pairs. For 2 days Fox ran on, carrying the sunflower at his tail's tip. The Indians say that he still carries the scent of sunflowers at the tip of his tail. And finally he grew tired, and Otter took the flower and ran over the frozen lakes and across watercourses, dodging his pursuers. The ice behind him melted, and torrential floods followed. Yet the best runners among the enemy, headed still by the mountain lions, were close behind. Now the kite swooped down and picked up the flower, and with a speed surpassing all animals and most birds, he disappeared from their sight. The last stretch was finished, and the kite brought the sunflower to the hollow tree where the woodpecker and the sandhill crane waited. He was received with great joy. The next day the crane left the hollow tree and walked down to the lakeshore in search of food. There he stood, watching the coming of his feather friends and the water birds. He found that he was unable to fly because his wing feathers were so badly burnt. So he ran up and down the lakeshore, happy to think that spring had come again at last. Such is the tale of the sandhill crane who wintered in the Northland with his elder brother, the woodpecker.